I've been in environments where it's just not changing because there's no self-awareness, or we have that pre-season meeting. This is our culture. These are our values. Nobody talks about behaviors.
Yeah.
And then nobody lives anything true. Nobody knows what the value means.
Right.
People do it. And so that's just lack of awareness for me. Whereas with Simon and the group, we must have done 2 to 3 weeks of this cultural stuff till we got to where we felt we were accountable and we knew exactly what it meant to have these two values and what those behaviors meant. And it was very easy as practitioners to operate. Right. Have a challenging conversation when you've got reference points.
Yeah, right.
And that's not done very well in high performance environments, in my opinion.
Welcome to episode 10 of the Untapped Potential podcast with today's guest, Dan Howells. Dan is a high performance coach with a career spanning over 15 years of work in an elite sport, both in the UK and in the USA, including work at the UK Sports Institute, England Rugby Sevens, and the Houston Astros Major League Baseball team, just to name a few. Dan lectures at Brighton University and is also the founder of Collaborate Sports, where he's passionate about creating real-world learning opportunities for developing coaches and practitioners to enhance their impact and success within performance sport organizations. In this episode, Dan shares his experience, some of his main challenges, how he has maintained a successful career whilst having a balanced life outside of work, why he founded Collaborate Sports and the skill set he offers to practitioners, and finally, what he sees needs to change in sport to facilitate the full potential of practitioners coming forward. I think you're going to really love this episode, really candid conversation. Dan has a really unique perspective, I feel, and this is kind of one of the major reasons why I really am excited to speak to him and to interview him. So without delaying you any further, here's this conversation with Dan Howells. Welcome to today's episode, and Dan, thank you so much for coming on and offering your insights.
No worries. Really happy to be here, buddy.
Just for those listening, so Dan and I met at the EIS, or UK Sports Institute now, a long time ago. Yeah. And I've been kind of very open and honest about my experience with the EIS myself. And in fact, that time I was deep in my anxiety of my lack of self-esteem, my lack of ability, my comparison to others, and you are one of the people that I compare myself to a lot. And when I say all this is all my skews. This has nothing to do with the environment. This is from my perception anyway. And so kind of today, like I said, the intro, like today, first half, I suppose, of the day, I'd love to dive into your experience in performance sport, and then kind of we'll transition into kind of Collaborate Sports and where that is going and why it's there in the first place. But I suppose the first question really, kind of what I'm leading with really, what were your main drivers as to get into the coaching realm, like to become a coach?
Yeah, I think the drivers, I probably understand them more now based on probably what we'll get to later. Right. But it always had this element of wanting to help people, right? If I think about my university degree, in my third year, we were doing group study sessions where I was helping people make sense of the information. And I think back to that and realized that I had a bit of a knack of helping people, whatever that looked like. And I didn't really know what S&C was at the time. I wanted to be a sort of in the lab doing physiology because that's how the degree was structured. And so then going and doing internships and opening my eyes to coaching and seeing that, okay, I can see that skill set being manifested in a practical way outside of learning. But I'd also been an athlete, and I was part of sort of the early stages of S&C, receiving S&C as an athlete. And so that just sort of joined the dots for me. But I guess it was recognition quite early on, even just as a youth athlete, as a captain, like just recognizing your own skills is quite a powerful place to be. And I'm not sure everybody's quite good at that self-awareness. So those were probably the things that helped me understand my drivers, which were, I've got a slight skill I think I'm good at. It gives me energy and it gives me good feelings. Let's go with this,
Right. I love how you describe that around feelings. And that's something for me I've come into so much, like, what does it give you? In that sense, do you enjoy doing it? And it sounds so obvious, but for where I was anyway, and then also from the many of the conversations, that seems, I think it's there, but the awareness of that, like you just said, is not there. Yeah. So what was your So you're coming from a place from an athlete receiving SSC, and then your interest in coaching and delivering that. Where did you first start? What was your kind of, and more to the point, I think a better question would be, what was your attitude in getting a role in sport? And what I mean by that is, many of the conversations is this dogged yes man, kind of doing all you can to break into to sports, and which is very, very common. Is that the same for you, or was that same for you?
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into mentorship later, but what I'm recognizing is that maybe I was just a little bit more aware of what strategy meant in your career,
right.
and that wasn't to be sneaky or like get a black book of people names that I could call up. It was about, what do I need to do here to give myself the best chance and best opportunity of being successful. And I think that my athlete experience, where I was really, really applied in my dedication to my work outside of education. I was at school and I was studying, and I still trained hard, and I still held myself accountable to things. And I saw that as a process, right? A real process orientated journey to get to an outcome of where I wanted to create a career out of being an athlete. But that taught me at the time the benefits of having a goal, but a distant goal, and a lot of process orientated steps and behaviors that lead you towards that. And so if I think back to my third year in university, so my fourth year, my master's year, I'd got all my results done for my research paper like within 4 or 5 months. And I was like, wow, I need to start looking at jobs. And then this internship I saw in the States, and it was like 5 days away, the application date, submission. And I applied. And I was like, let's give it a punt. Like, this would be a great way to get elite level exposure. And I recognized that their ask I could match, because their ask was somebody who's got physiology interest, nutrition, S&C, and data. And I was like, okay, I don't know what I want to do. So that fits me nicely. And luckily got the opportunity and went out there. And so I didn't have any money to go out there. And I think that's what people worry about at the moment, is I can't do that. It's beyond me because of these constraints. Like, worry about that later. There's nothing better than getting offered a position and then going on and taking it on. And so I had no funding to get there. So I went and worked for 4 months in a personal training environment, and it became the best learning experience. I put a post out the other day about this, around thinking outside the box, working with, middle-aged women who wanted to lose weight, or diabetics, or learning disability kids in after-school clubs. All this stuff that I was doing then to fund my trip was actually probably better for my coaching than the actual internship. But it came from just doing it, like, just give it a go, take the chance,
right,
and then worry about it later.
Right.
And then after that, the strategies were about, well, we'll get into that in the UK Institute, but that was probably the first inception of my career, recognizing that I where I want to be needs some commitment from me. And I do say this last bit on this is investment. People would invest money with risk.
Yeah.
And they don't expect reward on the same day that they invest with risk.
Yeah.
So why do we think that our investment in us in our careers is a cost to us, and we expect something tomorrow?
Right.
Like, it's this short-term investment in the process that will return long-term. And even just this morning before this podcast, a mentee who's been struggling for 6 months, an older practitioner, and suddenly that opportunity came, and they've spent time in an elite environment and they are beaming. But it's the 6 months prior that of investment in time in their own development and networking, etc., that's got them there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No. Yeah, I love that, and it kind of could draw you back to so Ben Young, episode 8, kind of very much of the same philosophy, like just go for it, like worry about it later. And on one hand, that might sound reckless, but I agree with you. Like, you can find a way. There's always a way. Don't constrain yourself. And
there's what's the description? Like, they're not negligent decisions. They're not like extreme risks, but they're calculated risks. That's the word I'm looking for. It's something that logically fits the journey you want to be on, or the end goal. What doesn't fit the end goal of coaching is sitting back waiting for a job and not coaching in the time that you're waiting for it somehow. Make it happen some way or another. So
Yeah. You've mentioned awareness, and that's something that's always stood out for me, Dan. Like, you are very aware, and more so in a way than many of the people I've spoken to in the research process. And so I guess what is self-growth to you? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think growth is an acceptance. Somebody asked me yesterday, actually, what is it that if you could sum up yourself in one word, in terms of one word that defined why you're in the place you're in or how your career is shaped out. And the word I used was vulnerability. But I've not gone through some of the vulnerable traumas that other people have. So it's this comfort in vulnerability in whatever situation you're in, a career situation. 2, not know and ask the right questions, but be very self-aware of how you're being vulnerable. So if I was to come over to you and say in the Institute of Sport as a young coach trying to learn off you, Rich, why don't you do it this way? That's quite an unaware, aggressive, challenging perspective. And you won't perceive me to be vulnerable. And therefore your ability to maybe help me is diminished. Whereas if I'm saying, Rich, I'm loving this, but I'm a little bit confused. Help me make sense of what you're doing. Like, how have you got to this conclusion of this method? It's a different level. And it's much more vulnerable to ask that way because it suggests you don't know. Yes. And I didn't. But let's be honest, there's a lot of BS out there where people try to get this provider that they know and they don't. And so we'll just strip it back to vulnerability. That will get you further, in my opinion. It will actually get you more trust as well, I think. And so that word vulnerability really manifested through my career. But comfort in vulnerability, because there's being in control of your vulnerability, and there's being out of control with it. And so I was very much in control of it, I think. And there was a comfort in that vulnerability, which led to growth.
Just on that then, how do you, or how have you learned to be comfortable in discomfort? And an example for me would be, my experience of life have helped, like grief. But then I guess my daily practices, for example, I'll be in the sea when it's cold. I'll kind of different breath work. Like I seek little things on a daily basis to help my regulation or my like. What about you?
What's the word? Don't dwell. Like I talk to people about don't dwell on anything, because if you're dwelling on something, there's a really big chance that what you would say physiology, right? But I would say emotions are completely unlinear and disconnected to the facts of the situation. And so firstly, don't dwell. And secondly, make sense of it, of any situation. You can't make sense of anything alone. And that's where talking is a really powerful place. And again, going back to my career, I always asked questions. I always got curious, but I was always doing those things in a really personable way. I recognized that skill was okay. And I got it wrong. Like I got it wrong in times. But yeah, don't dwell is one of the biggest things I think I can advise people on. And it's easier to be said than done.
Yes.
But if you really get into that don't dwell, what if I don't worry about this? What's the worst that's going to happen? Like if you start asking yourself some real world questions, you can probably get to the fact that like it doesn't actually fucking matter. And I think I got to that point. Now I wasn't being ludicrous and I wasn't taking risks in my career, but if I made a mistake, okay, what can I learn from it? Not what am I fearing from this? And what happens. So yeah, very glass half full as well with that approach. So you've touched on a few things that I kind of wanted to. So you've mentioned mistakes, and that, which maybe we can come to, or maybe it's going to come into. You'll talk about it together. But the idea of you're talking about vulnerability and being honest, and just put your hand up like I don't know that. And I've mentioned it a few times in episodes. The idea of self-preservation, and what kind of many
or many departments have some element of self-preservation within. And what I mean by that, if this first time you've heard me say this, is the idea of kind of this defensive, I need to sound like I know what I'm talking about. I don't want to share, I've made a mistake. I don't want to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. And this kind of veneer suddenly appears or is put there, which then limits that type of interaction that you're talking about. And I would suppose, you mentioned mistakes. Well, I guess the first question, have you ever found yourself doing that yourself? And two, if not, how have you worked with peers that are doing that?
Yeah. So the first question is, have I tried to self-preserve? And
I mean, I guess there's probably, but or probably not. But like, have you caught yourself doing that? And then secondly, how have you interacted with other colleagues who potentially are doing that?
Yeah.
In this wall.
Well, I mean, I still do it. I think like it would be unfair for me to pretend to listeners that there's not a time when I tries conscious, that I find myself getting into this automatic mode of talking above my station, like talking above like really where I actually need to. It's funny because I did a sort of webinar with somebody the other day, and we had a laugh about this because there was the three of us and we were chatting, and the guy was sharing some brilliant stuff, and he started talking about some real specific physiological stuff, like high level, and the other guy, we're very interactive. Oh, hold on, like let's dig into that. What do you mean by that? And the guy just sort of froze, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't know actually." I was just like, fair play. Like you've not tried to BS there, and you've just gone, do you know what? I don't actually know there. That's something that's not even. It's nothing to do with what I'm talking about, really. It's just taking it to a level that is not needed to help myself sound better. And it was really quite funny. We had a chuckle. Wow. But it's recognizing in that moment that you're doing it and stopping yourself.
Yeah.
And so scripts really help me. I talk about scripts a lot, which are just phrases or cues to get me back on track. And so it'd be like, okay, hold on, I'm making this too complex. Let me dumb this down. That's a management for me. People might think I'm trying to make it easier for them. I'm not. I'm trying to bring myself down to simplicity. Checking for clarity is a big self-awareness piece where people continue to talk at somebody irrespective. Whereas if I go, am I making sense, Richard? Like, do you need me to go back in any way? Is that clear? And those are things I think people don't do because they don't have self-awareness. And those things come from the days of the IS or Institute of Sport, where we were forced into collaborative discussion and leadership things that was role play orientated, which was really cool. It's uncomfortable, but I was happy and vulnerable I had comfort in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have found myself doing it, and I think it happens to everyone. I think it's natural, and I think it stems from the way you're taught. There's a power dynamic of being taught this textbook orientated work, and us manifesting that into our working environment to go, right, well, I have to patch myself to that level, and actually simplicity wins every time. So yeah, I've definitely done it, still do it. It's just checking yourself and having management solutions in the moment, agile solutions.
Yeah. I love that, and I think you're completely right. I think there's just an automatic unawareness sometimes of starting to go down that road, but just to bring that pause in and to then recognize that and to put your hand up. I think that conversation you just mentioned was a great example. And how have you dealt with colleagues who have got this wall of self-preservation that are limiting? I guess an example recently, I had a performance who wasn't taking any responsibility for a situation. This is not me working with them. This is and this coach was kind of like, it was almost cornered, like just the blame was put on him, cornered in this situation. And so my question is, and I hear that quite a lot, like these departments, like everyone's focused on the technical elements, which are obviously really, really important, but the human stuff gets in the way of applying those in the best way for the whole. And so any suggestions of like, how do you work with someone, either a level peer or maybe a lead that is self-preservation or for whatever reason, maybe they're most likely unaware of it. How do you work in that situation? How have you done it in your past?
Yeah, I think it's being brave. People aren't brave enough to challenge, but it's challenging in a real soft, empathic way. So if we go to a peer situation, is, and I always say, I challenge mentees to ask for permission. Rich, do you mind if I offer some feedback as a friend as opposed to like a peer? And the fact that I've asked that permission, the likelihood of you saying no is quite slim, unless you're really stressed and it's not the right time then. But if you go, yeah, sure, you're going to be quite dubious. So look, this is just an observation, and I just wanted to share it with you because I'm not, just in case you're not aware of it. If you are, that's fine. But the way you do X, Y, and Z seems to come off in ABC way. And look, again, speaking as a friend, I'm not saying this is my opinion. I'm just saying it's an observation, but I know it's an observation others have potentially made.
Right.
Yeah. What do you think of that? How do you feel about that? I know it's uncomfortable to hear. So very empathically, coaching orientated.
Yeah.
And that would be the first way I'd approach that. Because I think if you ignore it, then, especially if they're unaware, you're doing nothing to help them.
Yes.
And they may not, it'll be short-term pain for long-term gain, I think, if they want to change and they want to be aware. A lot of people that don't want to be aware, personally, those people are not useful for MDTs, in my opinion,
right,
teams. Right. And so for you being a member of a team that wants to be collaborative, taking that punt and being brave will benefit you in the long run.
Yeah.
Now, the only place you need to be careful here is about dynamics and relationships. So if that person is a right-hand man to somebody who's a stakeholder, then it's probably not a strong play. So it's contextual, but the strategy then, if everything is sort of even for you to be brave, is that approach. And that's very different then, isn't it, with the power dynamic above.
Yeah.
And that might be that you ask for feedback to show your vulnerability first.
Yeah, right.
You say, look, help me understand why this is potentially on me.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And then be like, can I speak freely? Is this an open dialogue that I can share some feelings, not saying they're right, but how I feel about this? And again, it's an asking permission sense. Because if they say, no, I'm not asking you to contribute here, I'm telling you. You go, okay, well, I know which way it is. Because, there are some environments you'll have to toe the report line as it's demanded of you. But again, I would challenge you as an individual listening to think, if my values don't align to the behaviors, then I've got to get out.
Yes.
And if I don't get out, who am I really letting down? Probably myself. And then am I chasing a badge or a situation more than an experience? Because it comes back to that word I've circled that you highlighted earlier. You're not enjoying it at that point.
Yeah. And that's the uncomfortable truth, that's just the uncomfortable truth we have to face, or if you're listening to this, to take control. And, in this example, I guess I'll fast forward, and in this one example, like this head of performance, this guy did do a similar thing from what he told me. And the head of performance was, I don't care about your feelings. And I think, kind of coming back to what you just said about they're probably not right for that MDT, and I the idea around leadership and what, how do people get into leadership positions? Is it based on their technical application over the experience? Or
no,
is it
people get into promotions based on potential, not competency. Nobody gets put into a leadership, so promoted. They might go from one business to another, right? But in an environment, a performance team that's like I've pushed through the ranks, you're the next logical person and you've got potential to fill this gap. It doesn't mean you're the right person, but they get put in that role with no experience.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, really, more than anything. So, this person sounds like they're a potential individual that's not got leadership experience or qualities. Hopefully they'll learn from them. And we've all been there. We can only ever get better. But if you get a situation like that where you've tried to say, look, I don't necessarily agree with this. Can I speak freely? I think there's some shared burden of cost or risk or outcome here. And they disagree. So, okay, we can agree to disagree, but it'd be unfair for me not to voice my opinion. Right. And I would hope that that's not held against me. So you have to walk smart a bit with communication, And that's where young coaches, emerging coaches are limited, because nobody teaches you this stuff and it's definitely not high level. It doesn't sound high level, does it? It's quite simple to ask for permission. And that's why I do the stuff with the mentees on the soft skill development, is asking for feedback, giving feedback, having challenging conversations. And it's tough. It takes practice, reps under the bar for getting strong, and reps of communication for talking in difficult situations.
Right. I mean, and that's one of the main reasons for this podcast, to discuss this type of stuff that's not openly discussed. And coming back to, you kind of said about mistakes, and I kind of like finish off in your personal journey, or not finish off, but what have been some of the mistakes you've made, or maybe some of the lowest points or biggest challenges within your career as a performance coach?
Yeah, we've spoken, haven't we, about your journey and my journey, and you've given me that sort of praise, I guess, which is nice to hear, around being balanced. And I really struggle to reflect on really dark times that people talk about. And we can maybe get into why that is later. It's really about sort of boundaries, and again, self-awareness and being brave, and saying no, which we can get into. But in terms of sort of challenges, I've had what everybody has, which is I've had injuries on my watch. I've had pressure put on me by coaches, with certain ways they've spoken at me and held me accountable before something's happened. If this happens, it's you're on the block. And it's like, don't dwell again. Like, don't worry about those things. These people that you come across that have that detracted or polar opposite set of values and behaviors to yourself is likely an individual you don't want to be around too long and ever rely on, to be honest. But yeah, I guess the challenges are just the standard ones, is injuries, challenges with colleagues, conflict management, and those kind of things.
Dive into one of those, because I think that's what I'm hearing about a lot. If you want to, like, because I that's what I'm hearing about so much. It's just that in the in-team human stuff that's really causing the biggest problems.
Yeah. So what do you want me to dig into? A bit of the conflict side of things?
Yeah, like just an example. I tell you what, I remember kind of you telling me one at the UKCL or recently, like around, I think it's a really good one. Like when you were at the Astros, you guys were starting you were going to fill the gaps in, but were starting really early, and the athletes weren't coming in until X time. But yeah, dive into that one. How you navigate.
Yeah, so there are probably two in that environment, because it was quite high pressure. But yeah, the first one was this observation that we were having 5:30 a.m. meetings.
All right.
And I asked why, and I asked, that's cool. I said, somebody not in this environment. There was a statement to back up why I was going to say what I said, versus somebody who was being challenging. I said, hey, help me understand how come the place is open so early and we have a meeting at 5:30? What's that to accommodate? So I could recognize it's for a reason. And I wasn't saying, why are we opening at 5:30? And it was, the athletes want to be in at 6. I'm okay, cool. And I didn't say, do they? That would be the challenge that would have basically created friction. But in my mind, I thought it. So it was the self-awareness to park it. And the other thing with sort of resolution is resolution takes time. And we're impatient as practitioners. Again, with our programming, we think that we can get people strong in 4 weeks, when like the reality is it takes a long time. And so we're impatient. And so I was very patient. I took the whole year of this was 45, 60 days straight of spring training of those early meetings. And I wore it, and I took some evidence and just observed things and took stock. And what I observed was there was no link between being in that early and what the athletes needed. And they weren't coming in to train. They were coming in to just sort of sip coffee and chat. And so then it was being brave. The next year, it was like, look, what if? So it wasn't like, I think we should do this. It was a collaboration, and the language was rich. What if we could enable the players to have more recovery time? Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I like that idea. What do you think? Okay, well, look, like opening up the facility to allow people to come in at 6 a.m. is not a high performance behavior, in my opinion. What about us giving them more opportunity to stay in bed? Oh, they won't like it. Okay, but why don't we try it? Well, I'm not too sure. Okay, well, what if I try and it's on me? That's me being brave. I said, would it not help the staff to have a later meeting at 7? And would it not help athletes to stay in bed and be at the ballpark for 7:30? It's never been done that way. Okay, I understand it's never been done that way, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily the best thing for the athlete. And we're athlete centered, right? So I'm coaching people and it's painful. It's actually painful to do because we want responses now, don't we, as coaches?
Yeah.
And we expect a blow up whistle and we get a response. But with peers, you've got to work at it. And so I was coaching them to a potential resolution, and I was being brave about the potential impact of it not going down well, and it'd be on me. But the logic in the decision for me was like, if it fails, I fail with positivity because I tried, and there'll be something deeper rooted in the culture that the one man can't change, but I'm going to give it a go because it's better for everyone. And there's not many brave people in high performance.
No.
Not many brave people to want to change things. And I'm not putting myself on a pedestal there at all. But what I mean by that is when you see people be brave and chat around things and come up with iterations of ideas, it's a thriving place to work.
Yes, yeah. I want to briefly interrupt today's conversation with Dan, just to ask you and see what you're reflecting on around development, the non-technical elements of how you develop that within yourself. In particular, I want to draw your attention to the Practitioner Needs Analysis Coaching Program. The conversations in my research have shown clearly that 160 highly successful practitioners supporting some of the world's greatest athletes have on one level achieved a great deal within high performance sports and academia. Yet on a much more personal level, many are quietly suffering to maintain the perception of being successful and happy. This is the inconvenient truth sitting just under the surface within our high performance environments. The cost of this truth ranges from divorce, absent parents, physical and mental illness, all of which contribute to limiting the performance impact we all strive so hard to achieve. The human element has been forgotten, with many top practitioners now finding ways to leave our beloved industry. My research process has spawned the services I now provide to support performance practitioners. Athletes have a vast array of options within their support network to help them thrive, optimize, and activate their full potential. But very little is currently aimed at offering this unique support for performance practitioners. This is where the Practitioner Needs Analysis Coaching Program fills that gap. The Practitioner Needs Analysis allows you to identify what qualities are most important for you to show up in your role, career, and life in your fullest expression. It provides an analysis that highlights the components of your life, giving you clarity on what is blocking you, how it's blocking you, and what you need to do to release those blocks. This guides you to tailor your goals and actions away from potential burnout, divorce, or illness, and instead towards one where you thrive as a practitioner and in your personal life. To find out more about the group and one-to-one options Men Behind Sport offers, visit www.menbehindsport.com or email me at richard@menbehindsport.com. Now, back to this great conversation with Dan Howells.
And that we got to that point, and there was little niches and cohorts of groups of staff that did that really well eventually. And
great example.
Yeah. So that was that. And then the other one of conflict was.
Can I just on that conflict? But just because you said about brave, and I suppose, and maybe it ties into the example you're about to say, but I agree with you. Many are not brave because they're fearful of their job, and so many of the conversation I've had already in this, and I wonder if it's the same for you. Many have that ability to be brave because they have other financial options outside of their job, meaning that they're not treading on eggshells. I don't know if that's related to you, or you dive into it, whatever you want.
Yeah, I think, I guess brave has to be contextual. I'm more brave than I was as a young coach. Am I more brave because I've got fallback options? I mean, look, like speaking openly, like I was moved out of the Astros eventually for factual reasons I'm not so sure of. It's just the way they operate in the States, and things have changed, taking different tacks. And I had 30 days to get out of the country and no job. Okay. So what? Like I'm not necessarily homeless. I've got things that I can fall back on, like my parents, even as a 40-year-old, I go live with my parents. It's not that bad. And that's, I think the problem is that oh no, the risks are too high. It's like, these aren't really high risks, to be honest. Yeah. They're human. They're logical things. If they fit right in your mind, they're probably right. If your gut instinct says that you should probably say something or do something, you're probably right. it's just you understanding the potential outcome and risk for that and what you'd be happy with. And I've always been happy with challenging people in environments, but doing it in a human way, not to be an ass, not to be a dick about it, just to be a really human way about it, and be collaborative with the greater goal in mind, which is performance impact and outcomes. Brave is going to always be contextual, but you have to do it in an artistic way. None of it has got to be done in a negative way. Otherwise, you're just a high performance coach who doesn't care about your feelings again. And that has to come into it. Totally does.
Yeah. No, great. And like you said, I think it's so nice to hear you say that, what is the worst that can happen? And when you really boil it down to that, like, is it worse to go through that slight discomfort, or is it worse to stay there in that environment that's making you feel resentful and, whatever else is going?
Yeah. And I think people have this perception of how their skills align to something that they want to do aspirational, but the sooner people recognize the transferability in their skills, the better. And you'll find enjoyment where you can apply what you're good at.
Yeah.
And you'll find elite sport that doesn't allow you to apply your skills. But you've got the job and you've got the badge, but then you're just not being true, authentic to yourself.
Yeah.
And, I left one job 20 months into the role because of it was comparable on financial, but in terms of opportunity and for me to work within a team, a much smaller team, a lesser professional team, but to be in a much more high performance team that aligned to let me thrive with my skills and therefore enjoy the experience, was a no-brainer for me. Yeah. Some people would say it might be a backward step or a sideward step, but it didn't matter to me because I was quite clear about why I was doing it.
Right.
Same with teaching now. People keep asking me, like, don't you miss elite sport? I said, I'm still doing stuff I love. I'm still coaching students. I don't have to teach in a dictatorial way.
Yeah.
I can get amongst it. And I went and presented at Astro the other day and I coached my keynote. I got down into the audience. I got the speaker and I got everybody to contribute in the session. So it was a facilitated coaching learning experience, not I'm speaking, you're listening situation. So it's just finding ways to use the skills and use what you're good at and you'll get enjoyment. And just don't think that because it's a professional outfit competing at the top level that it's the best place for you to express your skills.
Yes.
And so teaching is just one of those other ways I can do it. And it fits with other things in my life. And the dog business I have, which is completely aside from S&C, is about helping people, which comes back to that first point of, right, I've got true comfort in what I'm doing because I'm helping people. Yeah. And if they come and say, I've got some problems with my dog and I've got some behavioral advice for them, how to work around that, that's coaching, Yeah. So it's not sport and it's with animals, but it's a different way to get enjoyment out of what you're good at.
Yeah. I guess the takeaways from what you just said, for those who are listening, I wonder if you've got this, but for me, it's just being super clear of what you want, not being detaching from the idea of level of athlete versus that's how successful you are. So get rid of that, forget about the badge, like do what you want to do that makes you feel, again, come into that feeling. And just the transferable skills that we all have that I think many can't see, when in fact they're there, right? They can't see it because you're using it every day. And
I think just on that, the skills thing is really important. And if you don't know what you're good at,
right,
that's a really not dangerous place to operate. But how can you move forward with a career trajectory that goes up at a rate of knots if you're not very clear about what you're good at, because you don't know what roles are right for you then. So getting feedback is really important on that if you don't have it. And you talk about maybe we'll get into this, but like management of boundaries and things like that are really important on the way.
I mean, I think that Astro's example is a really great one you said, and I think maybe boundaries now, or like, I guess, segueing into like collaborate sports and what, from where I see collaborate sports, it's filling this very unique whole. And so why did where did Collaborate Sports come from? What was your, to go into that a bit?
Well, so in COVID, I'm being fortunate enough to being paid at that time and sitting at home in my Florida home. And it's not all rosy. I bought that house in the week that COVID hit. And so obviously the risk that you think is coming with like not being paid is astronomical, but I don't let it bother me. I just go, don't like things will level out. Like it is what it is. Don't let that affect everything else I'm doing. But I was fortunate to be being paid, but I'd had my purpose taken away. I said this on other podcasts, which was I knew why my drivers, as you say, my drivers were being taken away. I was like, well, how do I get that back in my life with some reciprocity of the sense that I can give back to people? And so I started doing like free webinars, and it stemmed from a recognition that people are obsessed with, and I think it's FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah, right.
They're obsessed with learning the highest level of information. Even if they don't understand it, they're obsessed with being present or part of it or signing up to the online course and not necessarily finishing it, right? And I thought that's not fair on yourself, and B, that's just not real world. And I just got frustrated with observing all these webinars that were well intended, but I just felt people were getting a bit of a harsh reality, or false reality, sorry.
Right.
Where they turn up and learn about complex data or load management systems, and they haven't got their basics around program design sorted,
Right.
And what they're learning is not even applicable in their youth school system. They have 1 hour a week to work with athletes. So I was like, you know what? Let's get into the real world here. 2 ways to do that. Let me be vulnerable and be a high level practitioner that dumbs things down for people and making it relatable and sensical as such. But B, let's give people a voice.
Right.
And so everything I'm doing like that what I did in Australia with Astro last week was let me give everybody a voice. 400 people talking to each other with people they'd not met before, feeding back to me, right? To bring alive the learning.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I think about and I've been fortunate enough to be, as you have, say the UK Institute, part of teams that thrive based on collaboration.
Yeah.
Yet traditionally learning and jumping into performance environments, you just adopt what's being done and what's being taught.
Right.
Even if you don't make sense of it or don't understand it. So I was like, we've got to get back to a little bit of this. And that was the gap for me. There's a lot of people working in S&C, not being able, with lack of confidence and not being able to make sense of what's really needed as opposed to what they want to do. And I think there was a disconnect while I was observing of practitioners making decisions based on their interests and ego versus the needs of what was in front of them. And the only way to make sense of anything is reflective practice. And that means talking to someone. Right. And so that's why I got into it. And I just saw this. It wasn't pre-planned. It was just started from wanting to help people have a voice. And I was like, you know what, there's something in this. And then I was like, my time has become quite stretched here. So I need to sort of, create a bit of a business, unselfishly. So that's how it was born. I just look to continue adding value, and for everything that is a investment for people, I'm putting out other stuff that's free. Like you are with this. So yeah, that's how it originated.
Yeah. And I'll remind you guys, who have the listeners, at the end, but there's links to Collaborate Sports below. But I'll remind you at the end. And so just to go into kind of that, because I guess the area that really stands out to me of what you're doing is the soft skills and the kind of your soft skills mentorship that you talk about. And you obviously got an S&C one, you've got data one, you've got injury one, I think, or injury rehab one.
Yeah, rehab. Yeah.
But I guess focusing on like what. If I'm right in saying this, I remember when you first launched the soft skills one, the S&C one, the technical one like took off, and the soft skills one was a bit harder to I guess get applicants. How do you see, or I guess the question, away from the exercise, what do you think makes a good versus great practitioner, away from the technical?
Yeah, a great practitioner is adaptability and agility in everything they do that's human. Right, nothing to do with the the coaching is part of it, but Nothing to do with the underpinning knowledge around stimulus input and output in S&C, which is essentially what S&C technically is. Like, what do I need to put into the body to get out of the body, right?
Right.
It's not what you know, it's how you deliver it.
Right.
Okay. And it's about that being brave side of things again. And the best coaches out there keep it simple. They make things relatable. They think strategically about the communication pathways. They think about the three types of email or the three forms of communication they have to make to get the message through so that nobody slips through the net.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And that in the moment they can flex their style. And again, you and I would have been privy to the behavioral stuff that we did at the Institute of Sport alongside the psychologists, and I became accredited as a spotlight practitioner for that reason. And that's been one of the most powerful parts of that soft skills program, right, is when people are made to reflect on themselves in a deep way that they don't get otherwise. So just think about all those practitioners that have never sat down and understood themselves.
Right, exactly.
It's a very high percentage.
Yeah.
And those are the great practitioners because they're as good as an actor as they are an S&C coach. And it's not unauthentic. It's authentically driven because I want to provide you, Rich, as my athlete or coach, with the best solution to get the job done. Yes. And if that means asking you how you feel about a situation, when in my inner conviction and my inner me, my inner, what we call preferential style, is to say, that was BS. We need to do it this way.
Yeah.
That's not going to hit home with you if you're not that type of communicator.
Yeah.
And that you go on gut feel and you want to be included in things.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to take the long route round, but it will give me the performance outcome I need. And that's where there's fantastic practitioners when they think about those things.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'll give you, again, it's being vulnerable. All the people that come on the soft skills mentorship are distinctly different to other people.
Yeah.
They have a vulnerability that I see back in myself when I started my career, or at least a curiosity.
Yeah.
Even if they're not comfortable. And I'll give you another stat. Me and Sean McLaren have done a data skills mentorship, and it's fantastic because it serves a very specific need and purpose. It also thinks about the future. That's where the future of an S&C coach is going to be, is to have that set of skills as well, alongside the soft skills. But in promoting that type of personal development opportunity, which is still exactly the same model as all my other mentorships, which is taking on a journey with a mentor, part of a collaborative process, part of a cohort, etc. We sold that out, 18 people, 2 sets of 9 cohorts. We purposely made it small and closed it off after that point. We sold them out both in a day each time.
Uh-huh.
My soft skills mentorships, people have to be not coached into it, but they have to meet me or have a discovery call,
right?
Or they get word of mouth from somebody else who recommended it. They need to have their head turned and need to be almost made to recognize that that's a gap.
Yes.
But if I said to 100 people, can you code and can you not? There's no distinction. It's yes or no. It's binary. It's black and white.
Yeah.
But people don't think, they don't have an awareness about the soft skills in the same way.
Yeah.
Can I deal with conflict? Yes or no? No, I can't. Well, maybe I can. Yeah, I think I could. No, that's what I'm asking. If you had to bet your house on it, could you, conflict resolution strategy? What would you do? And then, do you know what I mean? It's astounding to me the last 12 months. I mean, it's brilliant in one sense because of the business side, but in the other, I just wish people were more vulnerable, and more open to not knowing, and BSing themselves a little less.
Exactly that.
That's people are sort of up. Yeah, the BS side of things. They're not being true to themselves and being honest with themselves sometimes.
100% agree. And I would say I've experienced. I mean, I've got my the programs and the coaching that I offer. It's exactly that. It has to be a conversation, which is right for me as well. But I think what's helping, and this is my experience, again, the just sharing my story through this and using very real stories, this podcast as well, and the research that I've done, it's that connecting, oh wait, other people feel this, or so I hear what you're saying
Yeah,
about.
and the whole mentorship vibe or the benefit. I actually didn't want to call it mentorship, but it's again, if I go back to my strategic communication, I have to use words that resonate with
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
people,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I have to make it relatable. Well, at
Yeah.
the minute, the word mentorship is quite relatable for
Yeah.
people, and it wasn't there in our in our days. We talked about mentors, but we didn't
Right.
talk about mentorship like formally. And um, yeah, it's been fascinating, but the whole for me, I'd actually think it's more just reflective practice. It's putting
Right.
yourself in a process of reflection
Yes.
and challenge, all those things that help you grow. What doesn't help you grow? Just doing it because I've always done it that way.
Yes.
Following orders. At
Yeah.
times you'll have to, but to grow, you need those things like reflection, challenge,
Yeah.
discussion, sense making,
Yes.
discovery,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
those things. And that for me is why I try to bring that to every facet of what we're doing,
Yeah.
whether it is a binary skill like data skills.
Yes.
So yeah.
No, I love that. Last couple of questions.
Hmm.
I guess the first one is what do you see,
Hmm.
or what makes an elite performance staff department environment?
Hmm.
What are the best environments you've been part of?
Yeah. Um, I'll come back to that vulnerability again.
Yeah.
I've in the best coaches I've worked with, I've seen that in them, even though they're above me and they're people I look up to. I've seen them be vulnerable and be comfortable with it. Um, I've seen people be comfortable making mistakes. That's a different side of that vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen people um, be really balanced in the environment. So having a head coach go home at 2 o'clock because he's had his work done and he wants to see his kids, but also 3 days later stay until 7 o'clock because he's
Yeah.
got to get work done is a really nice balance of getting the job done
Yeah.
as opposed to leaving at 2 o'clock every day and
Yeah.
leaving all the
Yeah.
other staff behind or staying there 7, 8 in the evening every night and other
Yeah.
people feeling guilty.
Yeah.
And so it's that leading by example
Yes.
is really important. And so when I look at my Astros, what I learned from that was England Sevens from Simon Amor, who's brilliant. And I learned from that. And I was like, guys, I'm done for the day. I've got my work done. There's a little bit more I'm going to do, but I'm going to take it home because I'm going to feel better about doing it there. And I also knew that I would be more efficient doing it there because
Right.
I wouldn't get caught in another question.
Yeah.
I said, and I wouldn't feel guilty as a leader leaving if people still had an hour to an hour and a half of GPS to get done.
Yeah.
Because the next day I could take that burden off them, or I could reposition staff members to do the GPS to give somebody else a bit of freedom. And there was no selfishness in that. It was a balanced approach to good boundaries and good balance. So that was really good. Feedback, honest
Right.
feedback
Right.
delivered in a really human way. Feedback that's honest in the sense that this needs to improve, like not in a we need this to improve, but in a this will help us
Yes.
as a collective, a very we orientated environment,
Right.
as opposed to I think or I want it done this way. What else? I will say as well, environments that don't rely on friendships.
Okay.
And that people might think, oh, well, I want to enjoy the people I work with. But I think that's a dangerous place to operate.
Yes.
I think that there's socially times to get together with people. But if they're your main crux and they're your main
Right.
friendship group, I think that's a really dangerous place to operate. And
I
so
agree.
that for me is where I've seen good leadership environments is that there's just this great respect of we'll do something socially and we'll do the big nights as a team. But if I'm hanging out with you all weekend or on my days off, what does that become? It becomes a bitch fest.
Yeah.
And that's not good for any performance environment. So I actually removed myself from times on that, and I got it wrong. There's times I was very social with colleagues, but that made it really difficult for me to have challenging conversations when I need to be brave.
Yeah.
And as much as I think I stepped into the Astros, I had no friends in America, and I really wanted to be social because I needed it for comfort.
Yeah.
But I recognized that it was going to come slip me up down the line. So
Right.
that's probably one thing that people don't think about.
Great example. And I think there's again, I've heard many stories of too much, and also it's hard. There's no life outside of work because
No, switch off.
you're right.
Switch off. So Simon was another good guy, a good example of this. So we need to switch off. And when I say by leading example, very fair, very accountable. He said, I need you to switch off. We'd go on tour and we'd have switch off days.
Yeah.
No, it would do any meetings, no rugby, no talk of rugby. Ask you how your family is, go and do your thing. But when we're on, we're on. And there was an expectation. But it was a dimmer switch. It was a right intensity for the right time, as opposed to that dimmer switch being bright light all 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which I think sport has that people just don't take control of. But it comes from the top because I've been in environments where it's just not changing because there's no self-awareness. Or we have that pre-season meeting. This is our culture. These are our values. Nobody talks about behaviors.
Yeah.
And then nobody lives anything. True. Nobody knows what the value means.
Right.
And it's just a bit of, again, like in American culture, they call it eyewash, just like glazed look,
Yeah.
They just tell you if it was eyewash straight out, which I quite liked. But people do it. And so that's just lack of awareness for me. Whereas with Simon and the group, we must have done 2 to 3 weeks of this cultural stuff till we got to where we felt we were accountable and we knew exactly what it meant to have these two values and what those behaviors meant. And it was very easy as practitioners to operate. Right. So one of the things was, I'm going deep here, but like one of the things was team first. And so we knew what that meant. It meant that if you were late and held people up for training, that's not very team first. And that was a great way for me as a practitioner to make my challenge to an athlete, hey man, that's just not very good. Like, come on, I need you to be better. Oh, no, come on, man. It's like, look, we know we need to be team first here more than ever. Okay. And then that would switch them. Right. Very easy to have a challenging conversation when you've got reference points.
Yeah, right.
And that's not done very well in high performance environments, in my opinion.
Yes.
But my job was so easy in that environment. And then I took that to the Astros and did it in our little S&C team where, being growth orientated, it's a buzzword, but we were really specific about what that meant, which meant that if I don't know, I ask. And that for me as a behavior, it would be for check, for understanding. And if we could have those reciprocal behaviors, we'd be great. And we continue to grow. And again, those things aren't given time and effort to in high performance departments, I don't think.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's such great examples. I guess what I'm hearing is honesty, feedback, openness. But really what you're talking about, I love that values example, because that's creating belonging to a higher cause.
Yeah. You're part of something. And that's really what we want to be part of, isn't it? The high performance practitioner, I want to be part of a thriving team. Yeah. But it starts there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And people bypass that years and years after each other.
Yes. So coming on, I guess, what then is your measure of success? How do you gauge, I'm sure that's changed throughout your career, but like, what's your measure of success now?
Do you know what? Like, maybe people don't want to hear this, but why do we have to measure against success? Like, why do we have to worry about that?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't sit there and give myself a pat on the back. Like, maybe people think I do, but don't feel like I consciously do. I think it's this self-awareness piece again, because if you're not self-aware, then people look for success. And I said this at the Astros. I said I walked into an environment where I wasn't seeing coaching. That wasn't successful for me. It didn't look like a successful environment, but we were winning. We won the World Series, no higher accolade, but I still saw that our operation wasn't very successful, wasn't very high performing. Right. So I think it's about having a detail of what the behaviors are. I think you can measure success on behaviors, which is process, not outcomes.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a well done, we've been successful. I think it's just your reference point again. to keep the ship moving in a really high performing way, and to keep your actions high performing nature. And I said in that environment, you know, this team will win without you, and they will lose with you. And irrespective, how we coach and behave should not change based on that outcome, success outcome. Let's look at being successful in our processes, and that stuff will just either take care of itself, which is a bit of, you know, a quote still, but it's probably not stuff we can influence too directly anyway. So stop worrying about that. You know, but yeah, I don't really measure myself in that way. I think I reflect on, am I behaving in the way that I need to behave to do what I want to do? And so it's being clear about, you know, I want to start this podcast, and so am I holding myself accountable to that, and am I doing it to a standard that I would accept is reasonably successful? Because I might only have one listen. Does that mean I have not been successful?
Right.
No, I think that like if I've gone out and done what I think I can do, I can't control people who listen or not. So it's probably important to dissociate from outcome, I think. Yeah.
And I think something you've not just got this conversation, but the conversation before, and it's the connection. Seemingly, it's the connection you form with the people you're working with, whoever that is, whether it's an athlete, whether it's a coach or a mentee, or whether it's someone who's bringing their dog into you. Like there's that human, that come back to the human connection and service.
100%. And I totally agree. So
Last question, and it stood out to me. Like you said, about don't dwell. And what's then your process of how do you not dwell? I mean, I say that, I guess, from my point of view, not dwelling or noticing there's anxiety, noticing there's worry, noticing there's something going on. For me, it's about sitting with it, not trying to repress or distract. It's about being with it. That's a very felt sense for me first, but then also like just being comfortable. It is coming back to what you said, being comfortable. Like that's my practice of it, sitting with the discomfort and being okay with that.
Yeah. So I think the don't dwell is where you have to get yourself first to make clear decisions. So if I'm emotive to a conflict, and I bring it home and I vent, all I'm going to do is put my version of events on a podium and pedestal, right? So actually just dissociate and go, look, just don't dwell on it. Then I can think logically about it, think about the facts, and then I can just go, well, actually, that's a nothing, move on. Or I can go, I need to do some things here, right? Which, in one conflict, I was like, I had a massive bust up with a colleague, and I was being blamed for something. And I just thought that these things happen. I've seen far worse. You're blowing this out of proportion. And they were like putting themselves on this like pedestal of professionalism. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know how you can have 60 people in the gym and not turn your back on one athlete at one point, Anyway, massive bust off, and we just walked off. And I was like, I remember distinctly driving home going, don't worry about it. I don't dwell. I was angry. I was very emotive at the time.
Yeah.
Just took some deep breaths. And I'm not sort of a breath guy or a relaxation, meditation kind of guy. I just put some music on. I think I just started singing, or just started focusing on something else, dissociating.
Yeah.
And that gave me some breathing space to think about it. And I was like, okay, I know why he's frustrated. I know why he's gone at me based on his personality. He's not very self-aware. I'm not going to change that overnight. Right. So I just said, what do I need to do here? And I just went, I'm going to be not the better man is the wrong thing, but I'm going to crack on like nothing's happened as such. So next morning, that person's in the gym, headphones on. I just walked straight up to him. Hey, morning, man. Not as if nothing's happened, but it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
And then later on in the day, I've got, hey, I'm not happy with how that ended last night, and it'd be cool if you want to just circle back later, come find me, and we'll just revisit it. And that person never came to find me. And it was just sort of washed under. But I was really pleased and happy with where I put myself in that situation, to just be like, this happened. So what? I don't think it's fair, but they want to have a pop. That's fine. But I'm not going to let it bother me. And also, I don't need to be liked by this person. I just need to work well with this person.
Right.
And I can be respected and not liked. I can be respected and probably liked, but I can also be liked and not respected. And so for me, it was this respect element of my decisions. I was like, I respect myself for trying to create some resolution in that.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can do.
Yes.
And we'll move past it. And it became a nothing. Like nothing happened. Didn't lose my job. Like the guy was off feet for a week. This guy twisted his ankle, and like life moves on. And still got my paycheck. And at the end of the day, the most important thing was still happening, which was I was at home spending time with my wife and not letting work dwell on me and impact that part of my life, which is unfair on them. So yeah. So I think the don't dwell is the start point to make, subsequently deal with it, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And get some, like you said, get some clarity on what the facts there. And great, Dan. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I kind of just to direct people, like, so Collaborate Sports, like, so bearing in mind this is November, and this we're hearing it now. This is going to be end of February 2024.
Yeah.
So Collaborate Sports, come back to kind of, is there anything you're offering right now, or your podcast?
Yeah. So monthly, there's free interactive webinars. You just got to check the website out, and anybody can sign up for those and get interactive with us in person, or they can receive the recording. They miss out on the interaction, which is fantastic for a practitioner, but equally life gets in the way. So that's free. It's kind of no excuses there to not get involved. My mentorships are up and running at the moment. We've got launching in July. If plans from November onwards go as I hope, we'll be doing the soft skills mentorship July through to December, an S&C mentorship with another co-mentor that will be based on an Australian and UK time zone, and then a LTAD mentorship as well, and a data skills mentorship. So lots going on. So loads of ways that people can get involved. I have the community, which people can join, and they generally join that through the mentorship programs. And then again, if hopefully by this point this goes to live, there'll be my podcast, which will be out and live as well. So all advertised through the website.
Right, and your Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn are below as well, so people can check you out if they haven't already.
Nice. And always reach out. I always give everybody who reaches out to me a response, because I always respected those people in the industry that did that to me. If I can't help, in the long run, I'll definitely give some short-term advice to help somebody. So reach out.
Right. Well, thank you again, Dan. Thank you so much, and I've really enjoyed this.
Awesome. Thank you very much, buddy.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Just to remind you, if you are enjoying the Untapped Potential podcast, if you like this episode particularly, or if you like the others that you've listened to already, please can I ask you to leave a review on Spotify or iTunes. By doing that, you'll actively help raise the awareness of this podcast.